Back on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show, taking you until 4 o'clock here on Facebook Live. And joining us is the host of the Jake Asman Show on SportsMap Radio, weekdays, 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. It's Jake Asman. Jake, thanks for being with us.
Guys, appreciate you having me on. Love Fordham, love the Rams, so it's always great to join you.
Jake, what's been your impression of fanless sports so far?
I think it's been better than I initially thought it was going to be. I think some of the individual sports, it's way easier to kind of just lock into what's happening. Like UFC, I thought, oh, what's going to be like without fans? But they were really the first big thing that came back. And the way they shoot it, you don't really even notice a lot of times that there isn't fans there. I think you only really notice it when there's no loud fans going wild during the walk-ins. But coming up tonight, there's a huge pay-per-view and there won't be fans there. And I still think, if it's a good card, it's a good fight, it will still be positive. Golf, same thing, right? You just kind of get used to just watching the golfers do their thing. I think out of all the sports we've seen, the NBA's done a really good job pumping in kind of that crowd noise and still having the PA address announcers to make it feel like you're watching a regular NBA game. And hockey's done a nice job with the goal horn noises for all the teams during the playoffs remaining the same. So it's been better than I thought. Baseball, I think, is the most noticeable just because these stadiums are huge and obviously, there's no fans. But even baseball has done a decent job trying to put in artificial noise and have some sort of background noise so it sounds a little normal. But honestly, my biggest thing I've said for months was, hey, if there's not going to be any fans, just get the sports back, right? Because ultimately, that's what we want, and we'll adjust it on having fans. So overall, I think so far so good.
Jake, let's talk about baseball. Obviously, today now, news coming out that one Reds player has tested positive. Now 20 straight days where at least one game has been postponed due to the coronavirus. Do you think this is a sustainable model forward for baseball for the rest of the season?
Yeah, so the big thing is going to be, well, if it's just one Reds player, okay, they postponed today's game at a caution, but so far the test results show that no one else has come back with this thing. So if that's the case, can they play tomorrow? Can they make tomorrow a doubleheader to try and make up the games? They can't have another outbreak. I mean, that's the most obvious thing. They can't be having a team go 2 weeks without playing like what the Cardinals are going through. But you also can't be postponing, game after game just because you're concerned that maybe somebody else has it. So there's that very fine line of okay, we don't want to play because we don't want more people to get it. But at the same time, how many days in a row do we need to run tests that nobody has it where we can't play? So it's an impossible situation for baseball because no one's ever been in this situation before. But I guess the hope would be that the one Reds player that has it, hopefully it's an isolated thing and he didn't spread it to a bunch of guys on his team.
Jake, you're a big Yankees guy, and so far so good, 13-6. There have been some up and downs sprinkled in there, but how satisfied are you with Garrett Cole at 4-0, beating the Red Sox last night? How satisfied are you with where the Yankees are at this point of the season?
It's funny because you look at Garrett Cole, and he's been awesome, but you watch these starts, and it doesn't feel like he's dominating. He's kind of just, finding a way to get guys out. He's not striking as many guys out as maybe he is certainly capable of doing, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the guy's pitching to an ERA in the low twos. And I thought last night against the Red Sox was probably his most complete start because he went into the seventh inning and pitched through 7. And he probably could have kept going if they really needed the game. I mean, he's just so good. And the fact that he hasn't lost a game since May of last year just tells you, really all you need to know. I watched him up close here in Houston the last 2 years. And, I knew the backstory of how he grew up a Yankee fan. And I just watched his career just totally change when, he got to Houston 2 years ago. And, I was screaming for months leading up to free agency and then during free agency, this is the guy you go all in for. I don't care what it takes. He's a difference maker. And just think where they would be without Cole because he's the only guy that's really given them length in that rotation. They're still trying to work Paxton back. Hopefully he builds upon that great start he had against the Rays last week. And, obviously Tanaka's Tanaka, you trust him in big spots, but, Cole was that missing piece and, he's come in and he's been great. And as we talked about, Emmanuel, he still hasn't had that dominant, 2-hit stuff taking you through 8 innings, and that's coming because, he's capable of doing that. So I think if you're a Yankee fan, you got to be very pleased with what you've seen so far.
If there is a concern with the Yankees, injuries just continue to pile up. I mean, Giancarlo Stanton just can't seem to stay healthy even when it feels like things are going right for him. And now Aaron Judge put on the IL with what they called a very minor calf strain. How concerned are you with injuries at this point, especially with guys like Aaron Judge, who even me and E-Man were talking about off the air? Judge wasn't supposed to play if the season started on time. He was going to probably miss upwards of 90 games. And Stanton, who missed so much of last season, just continues to miss time. What's the concern level for you with injuries as the season continues on?
It's concerning with Judge and Stanton. It just is. I mean, you look at Judge's injuries as an example. I throw out what happened in 2018 when he got hit by the pitch by the player on the Royals, because that's a fluky thing. But, the last 2 years, this guy's dealt with an oblique issue. Then he had the cracked rib that nobody knew about that he was playing through, at the end of September. And now, he's dealing with, a calf issue. You get concerned when these guys are so big and they're dealing with kind of these soft tissue injuries, because that stuff lingers. And I understand that, Judge apparently said he wanted to play through it. It's Boone called it, less than a grade 1 strain. But, Boone also told us the other night that there was nothing wrong with him, that it was just getting treatment. So I like Aaron Boone a lot, but how can we trust anything he says about an injury right now? So, you look at Judge, and the hope would be, retroactive. I think the August 12th is that DL or injured list. So, you hope by next week he could come back, and he better come back. If he's out longer than that, then the Yankees basically lied to you again. So, it's concerning because he was off to, arguably the best start in baseball, and you just want to see this guy healthy, because when he's right, he's as good as any player in the sport. So, the fact that they're going to lose him, yeah, they have the depth to replace him, but get him healthy and hope that he's ready to go, for a big-time playoff run. And with Stanton, this is supposed to be his prime. That's what frustrates me so much. It'd be one thing if he was kind of breaking down towards the end of this contract, but Giancarlo Stanton is 28, 29, 30 years old. He's in his prime right now. So for him to continue to miss games the last 2 seasons now, it's a big blow. And I thought, the way he kind of tailored his body in the offseason to kind of look a little leaner, he looked more athletic and he was still having plenty of power. I thought that was going to help him, stay healthy. But ultimately, when you're a guy that's that big, that strong, regardless of how lean you look, it doesn't take much for you to injure yourself. And I knew when he slid into second base against Tampa, all right, here we go. And I think every Yankee fan probably felt the same way. So those guys, they're probably always going to be, concerns and 2 players you got to worry about. But, luckily for the Yankees, they do have a ton of depth. But get those guys healthy, because in the playoffs, you want those guys in your lineup because the presence they have makes everyone around them better.
Jake Asman joining us here on One-on-One. Jake, bouncing off what you said about Judge, I saw an interesting debate on your Twitter feed. He's going to be a free agent in a couple of years now. The Yankees are going to look to extend him. It's almost inevitable that they need to extend this guy, that he's that homegrown talent. How concerned are you with those potential negotiations? Because this guy, when healthy, might be a $300 million player, but if he's only playing half the year, where do you go with him?
Right. It's so tricky, because obviously if you're a Yankee fan, you love Aaron Judge. Like he's the closest thing to like that Derek Jeter role in that clubhouse that they've had since Jeter's retired, right? The great player that just everyone kind of looks at and knows that, all right, he's the face of the franchise. He doesn't have the captain title, but it's kind of known, by everyone that covers the team that, Judge is the leader of that team, especially with, CeCe Sabathia retiring and Gardner certainly, on the back 9. So to not keep him, down the line would be shocking. But at the same time, you're already paying Giancarlo Stanton a lot of money for the next 7 seasons. Then you're also talking about, Garrett Cole being locked in for the next, 8 seasons after this. So, you already have 2 guys right off the bat that you're paying an enormous amount of money to, and one is injury prone at Stanton. And Judge is great, but are you going to give him a 7-8 year deal? I mean, that could be, a crippling contract if Judge can't prove he can stay healthy over the next few seasons before he hits free agency. So I don't know what you do. Can they work out a shorter term extension where you kind of you front load it, you overpay him over, maybe 3 or 4 years? Is that something Judge would do? I like, those are like legitimate conversations you have to have, because as much as I love the guy and he's phenomenal, I don't know if it's the wisest thing in the world to give the guy an 8 or 9 year deal, right? I would hope there's some sort of compromise that they can figure out. But at the same time, Judge probably will have a ton of leverage. Anyone that signs him automatically gets, one of the quote-unquote faces of baseball. So, if the Yankees don't, someone will overpay and try and bring him in.
Centering back on this season, believe it or not, the trade deadline is just about 2 weeks away at this point. And even with how good the Yankees are, they're probably going to need to make additions to this team if they want to make a big-time pennant race here. What would be the target in your eyes? I mean, obviously starting pitching, probably the primary concern given the struggles outside of Garrett Cole in this rotation. But if you're in the Yankees front office, what is the target for you at the trade deadline?
I don't know if they're going to do a whole lot just because I don't really know if a whole lot of teams are going to be making moves, right? You look at the standings, everyone's still kind of bunched together, and, it's a month is really not enough time to separate yourself. And, with the playoffs being expanded, every team, even if they're out of it right now, they're not really out of it if you think about it, because all you have to do is try to get to second place in your own division and you go to the playoffs. And if you can't do that, have one of the two other best records in the game and you're going to the playoffs. So I don't think we'll see a whole lot of action at the deadline because A, every team's still in it. B, we're also in the middle of a pandemic. So I don't know if it's the smartest thing in the world to be like wheeling and dealing guys and making them move across the country, while there's this pandemic going on. So I was shocked when, they agreed to the collective bargaining the collective bargaining agreement for the CBA to have a 60-game season, that they even had a trade deadline in there. So I don't think we'll see a whole lot of action. If the Yankees do anything, maybe another bullpen arm, just so they can, stop having to go to, some of these lower tier relievers when they're up 8-1 that decide to walk the bases, like Jonathan Holder did last night. But I mean, these are like first world problems, right? Because you're going to get Chapman back. You have Britton. You have obviously Chad Green there. You have so many guys. Ottavino, I didn't even mention. So there's not a whole lot the Yankees need. They just need to stay healthy, and they need Paxton to pitch like Paxton, Montgomery to keep doing what he's doing, and you have Cole and Tanaka as your 1-2. So I don't think they really need a whole lot. They just need to stay healthy.
Across town, the Mets got off to a very slow start, and Jacob deGrom scratched from his start with that neck issue that seems to pop up every so often. With how vulnerable the Mets have appeared early in this season and that wide open NL East, can the Mets even survive without a Jacob deGrom?
No, I don't think they can. I mean, if they still had Syndergaard, if they still had Stroman in that rotation, then I think it's like, okay, at least they have depth at pitching. I mean, Brody Van Wagenen was talking about how we have the deepest starting rotation in baseball. And now, half the guys are hurt, or the other half are pitching to like an 8 ERA. If you look at, what Steven Matz has done this year and some of the other guys in that rotation. So no, they need DeGrom to have a chance. I mean, the Mets have been better of late. I know they lost last night, but they're 9-12. They're in third in their division. They're not that far off from being back in the mix, especially with, as we mentioned, the playoffs being expanded. But DeGrom's out for a long period of time. I don't know how you make up his production. He is just, an absolute machine for them, just a model of consistency. And could you imagine over the last few years if he was playing for a team that was scoring runs? I mean, DeGrom's winning Cy Youngs by winning, 11 or 12 games a year. If he played for, let's say, the Yankees as an example, or Houston or the Dodgers, I mean, you're talking about a guy that's winning, 21, 22 games a year, and the perception of DeGrom is a lot different than kind of what it is nationally. I think people know, oh, yeah, great pitchers, won the Cy Young, but we're talking about like a guy that's like, wow, he is a projected Hall of Famer one day. He's we talk about the greatest pitchers in the game, and it's Cole, it's Verlander, it's Kershaw, it's all these guys that play on winning teams, and DeGrom's in that discussion. But I think he'd be clearly the number one guy had he played on a team that has won more games over the last few years. So no, to answer your question there, I don't think they could recover if DeGrom misses a significant amount of time.
Jake, it keeps looking more and more like Steve Cohen is probably going to be the next owner of the New York Mets, and the Wilpons will be out sooner or later. How monumental of a change do you think that would be for a franchise that is continually lagged behind in a New York market where money is king, obviously, and Mets have not been able to spend it lately?
I think whoever owns the team would be an upgrade over what the Wilpons have put in their 20-plus years of really being the controlling owner of the franchise. And listen, I think Met fans want Stevie Cohen because the story is amazing, right? The character, if you guys watch Billions, Bobby Axelrod, is based off of Steve Cohen. So I just think that is freaking awesome. And B, Steve Cohen grew up a Met fan from Great Neck on Long Island, right? Not too far from where I grew up in Syosset, Nassau County. So the fact that this guy grew up a fan of the team and has more money than anyone that's bidding on the team gives you this perception and this idea and this reality that he'll spend money and do whatever it takes to win. This guy has spent more money on an art sculpture or art statue than the Mets have ever spent on a free agent player came out, right? So I think if you're a Met fan, you obviously want anyone to buy the team that has the money to do so and to replace the Wilpons. But Steve Cohen is the guy that should do it because of his connection to the team. He's already been a minority owner for years. And if he comes in, I think just that renewed optimism of like, hey, if we need a big reliever and a pitcher and a bat, we could do that in one offseason. See, the Mets have spent money, but they've selectively chosen when to do it. Like they go into every season with if everything goes right, they could be really good. And we've seen that, right? In 2015, a lot of things went right. They traded for Cespedes. They go to the World Series. And then there's that steep decline from that point forward. The key for the Mets with new owners would be, instead of having a bunch of if everything goes right, you spend the money so there's a lot more sure things on your team. Like, there's question marks with every team. And if you hit on all those question marks, you could be pretty good. The issue for the Mets has been they have some nice pieces, but they don't go all the way, right? They're kind of half pregnant. Like, they want to win, but they don't want to do whatever it takes to win. And I think if you get Steve Cohen on board, the hope would be, wherever we have those question marks, they kind of get turned into more sure things.
Jake, one more before we let you go. NBA bubble now heading into the postseason. You've covered the Rockets the last couple of years, ESPN 97.5 in Houston. If there's one team in this setting that can win the entire thing, a dark horse candidate, who would that be in your mind?
Ooh, that's a great question. I really like Toronto, and I got to admit, I was wrong with what I thought about Toronto coming into the year. I just didn't see it without Kawhi. But you look at what they've been able to do this year. They're the number 1 rated defensive team in the league. Nick Nurse might be a top 5 coach in the NBA right now. He's obviously no fluke what he's done. And, to lose Kawhi and be as good as they've been, I think it's so impressive. And in the bubble where there's no home court advantage, where you got to kind of self-motivate yourself without fans being there, the fact that this team has the championship experience, the fact that this team has 10, 11 guys, if they really want to, they could play in a rotation, and they've won before, and they know how to play defense, and, their young players like Siakam and Van Vliet continue to get better. I don't know if they beat Milwaukee, but I think they got a chance to do it. So if it's not either of the 2 LA teams, and if it's not the Bucks, I really think Toronto at plus 1,000 odds, I think I saw, on FanDuel the other day. I think they're a really good bet if you're looking for some value and you want to stay away from the 3 obvious picks everyone thinks are going to win the NBA Finals.
Jake, appreciate you taking a few minutes here. Be well, stay safe. Thanks for a couple minutes.
Emmanuel Jackson, thanks so much for having me on the show. Go Fordham Rams.